I see that the title of this session is Imagine. And imagine that we had written this paper and finished this work, but we haven't. So, and this is sort of a, I guess, step B to the keynote, one of the keynotes that I gave at this symposium last year, where we'd started doing some interviews to understand how managers were using social science in reef management decisions. And after this symposium, and we being Tracy Schultz and myself, and a number of others who are on this slide, have conducted quite a few more interviews and started to look at or listen to what we heard and start to think about what that meant in terms of how social science could be done better. And if you imagine, I'll go back to Oliver's slide with the stingray, I think, chasing the blue swimmer crab. That's kind of where we're at. We're going round and round and round and round circles, and there's still lots of thinking to be done in this space. So I'd like to just also acknowledge Tracy, who's in the other room. So all hard questions, you can blame her. Angela Dean and Robin Gulliver from UQ, Clemence Belganui, who was a student with us when we started this work. Some discussions that we've had with Michelle, Maxine, Bruce and Sam. So there's quite a few of us who have been thinking in this space, but we're certainly not there yet. Okay, so I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands that we're meeting here today and First Nations people in the room. So we all know that the reef is a socio-ecological system, and we're all really interested in the social side. And the reef has been used by people for 60,000 years with our First Nations stewards and custodians through not so sustainable methods with early European settlement from that photo in the top there. But the reef has been providing people with fish, with resources, with cultural experiences, and the way we operate on the land also impacts on the reef. So we use the reef, we benefit from the reef, and we impact on the reef, we being people. And socio-ecological systems, the literature is prolific about the use of adaptive management to manage these complex socio-ecological systems. And you can think about the reef, you can think about the Murray-Darling Basin, for example. All adaptive management is the way to manage these systems. Sorry, we always think that the slides will be here. Yeah, so, and social science is critical to doing good adaptive management. But in the literature, this is spoken about quite a lot. Social science does tend to get a bit tacked on to adaptive management. And this is where we started with this work. We thought, well, I'm the main culprit of this. I was like, well, how do we do social science better so that it's like up there with biophysical science, which seems to drive the adaptive management agenda? And this is why this slide is called truth telling, because this is what I thought it was going to be. I thought we were going to go, okay, well, how do we get social science and we plug it into all of these parts of adaptive management? How do we make it so it is of the same value, importance, size as the biophysical information that adaptive management seems to be driven by? And this is actually kind of not what it should be. So what we did, we completed about 30 interviews with human dimensions research and monitoring creators and users. So federal government, state government, NRMs, NGOs, and the creators. And we asked them, well, how familiar are you with human dimensions research and monitoring? And that was the term that we used rather than social science. How have you been using it? And if we're thinking about how you can do it better, going back to that sort of like truth-telling slide of like, well, how do we plump it up? How can we do it better? What are the current barriers to this? What are the enablers to this? And what might be the next steps? So in terms of familiarity, quite often the response to familiarity was, well, yeah, I kind of used the human dimension stuff, but I kind of didn't know that that's what it was until someone pointed out to me. So familiarity is probably moderate, but at the same time, the responses showed that it was given high importance. So having a good understanding of what people are doing, where they're doing it, interactions with the reef is and the environment is fundamental to management, and managing the reef is a people problem. And you all know that, that's why we're here. But the human dimensions work seem to fall into these two categories when it comes to use. So it was quite often used to create some context, tell a story, be sort of the bridesmaid to the biophysical information. So this top quote, when I do that, you can't hear me. Okay. A human-focused lens to tell what's the story about why we're doing what we're doing, why we need to do it. So that kind of like that human context around that biophysical information was quite a common quote when it came to how human dimensions research and monitoring information was being used. But on the other side, it's also being used in this more monitoring and evaluation. And I think the Reef 2050 plan has got a lot to do with that. So there was some examples of human dimensions data and information being used to track progress and to kind of answer questions about the Reef 2050 plan. In terms of barriers and enablers, and in brackets there in the top there, you see it's about compatibility. So one of the barriers was that there was often a need to look forward rather than backwards. And a lot of the human dimensions research and monitoring is providing information on what has happened, what has been, rather than look forward. And I suspect, and this is just something that I sort of thought about the other day, was I think like a lot of biophysical information there's a lot of forecasting with modelling, and maybe the social science or the human dimensions data is not so good at looking forward. Same with space. So quite often this information needs to be used to answer questions in particular spatial focus areas. Once again, with the biophysical information, it can perhaps be extrapolated to different spaces through modelling, perhaps not the same for the human dimensions data. And then the format, and this is where the compatibility I think is really important. Quite often we heard comments about the human dimensions information needing to fit into formats that were there, that had been created to articulate the biophysical information. So it wasn't, quite often there was a lot of information that was there and available, but because it couldn't be communicated in the same way or in the format that biophysical information was being communicated, it was kind of off to the side. It was kind of left to tell the story around that biophysical information rather than have like its own kind of space. Okay, oh, this is where I really need to be over here. So then we heard some comments that made us change our thinking, which made me, I think there was a few people in the room who were already thinking this way, made me realise that it's actually not about kind of plumping up the social science to match the biophysical science. It's actually a whole different way of thinking about it. And so we need a better way to embrace the important role of social science in the whole Reef 2050 plan. To me, the human dimensions is really everything that we do, because it's all about how we shape people's behaviour, right from the top levels of governance decision making through to the landholder making decisions about how to run a farm. So human dimensions is everything in this place. And this was a comment related to the water quality improvement plan review and revision that's currently happening. I think all the work we're doing on the water quality improvement plan review and the new directions has its basis in a better understanding of the humans. And I think this one at the bottom, and I can't remember who said this, but this one at the bottom I think is like the major aha moment. It's about power relations. It's about actually starting these planning journeys, thinking about this as a social construct, as a human construct. And it's about the people in the room and having the right people in the room, and maybe even having the wrong people in the room as well as the right people. Okay, so if you ignore power relations, we'll tend to marginalise the social science to providing the technically recognisable widgets. And there's nothing wrong with sort of plugging understanding about people into an adaptive management system that perhaps is biophysically driven, but that shouldn't be the only thing that the social sciences do. Rather than genuine advice about absolutely changing power relationships so we get better outcomes. So I was wrong. That's not how we should be thinking about that. And this is why we're chasing that blue swimmer crab around and around in a circle. It's actually more like this. So rather than the social science plugging into bits and being plumped up, the social science or the human dimensions needs to wrap around the whole thing. We need to start this whole adaptive management process thinking about the reef as a social construct. So yes, the marine cow, we're still ruminating on this, and there'll be more to come, and hopefully at the next symposium we'll have the paper written. Thank you.